I've always prided myself on hard work. Nothing was handed to me. I built my own business from the ground up, invested every ounce of energy into making it a success. I was the guy who put in the extra hours, stayed late when everyone else went home, and pushed my company to become one of the most respected names in our field. My business thrived, and so did my personal life, or so I thought. I designed and built my dream home, a sprawling, modern house with wide open spaces, high ceilings, and more than enough room for a growing family. I recently became a husband to Sarah, a woman who fit seamlessly into my world. She was polite, respectful, and everything you'd expect from a woman who wanted to support her husband. We had it all: the house, the success, and what I thought was a bright future ahead. But things started to shift. Our house was enormous, and while I traveled constantly for work, negotiating deals and overseeing branches in other cities, I noticed that the upkeep was becoming an issue. Sarah wasn't much for domestic tasks, to put it lightly. She didn't cook, didn't clean, and didn't manage the house the way I'd hoped she would. I wasn't home enough to do these things myself, but every time I came back from a business trip, the house was more chaotic than before. Dishes piled up, laundry was neglected, and the once beautiful home I'd built was quickly becoming a mess. So, I decided to hire some help. I asked my assistant, Aaron, to find someone trustworthy, a housekeeper who could take care of things while I was away. A few days later, he introduced me to Susie, a young woman from a small village, who was in her 4th year of medical school. She was working to pay for her studies and rent, and she needed the job badly. She was kind, humble, and willing to do whatever was necessary to help out. I hired her on the spot. From that day on, the house was transformed. Susie worked wonders. The house was always immaculate, meals were prepared on time, and everything just seemed to run smoothly. She never complained, never missed a day, and she was incredibly efficient. While I was away for work, I trusted her to keep everything together. Little did I know, something else was being kept together, behind my back. I was used to my grueling work schedule, flights, meetings, and late-night conference calls. But one day, I decided I needed a break. I had been on the road for weeks, away from home for too long, and I missed Sarah. I figured it was time for a surprise, a romantic gesture. So, I came home a day early, excited to spend some quality time with my wife. I pulled up to the house, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I imagined the look on Sarah's face when she saw me. I pictured us having dinner together, maybe even a quiet evening watching a movie, something we hadn't done in ages. But when I walked through the front door, something was off. Susie was there, as usual, but she seemed flustered. Normally, she was calm, collected, and always greeted me with a polite smile. Today, she was nervous, standing in the hallway like she didn't know what to do with her hands. "Mr. James," she stammered, "I wasn't expecting you home so early." I shrugged, still smiling. "Thought I'd surprise Sarah. Is she upstairs?" She's not alone," Susie said quietly, avoiding eye contact. For a moment, her words didn't make sense. Not alone? My heart sank. I pushed past her, rushing up the stairs, my mind racing. No, this couldn't be happening. Sarah wasn't that type of person, was she? We had a life together, a future. When I reached the bedroom door, I hesitated for just a second before throwing it open. And there they were, Sarah and Aaron, in my bed. It felt like the world stopped spinning. I stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the two people I had trusted most in my life. Sarah, my wife, and Aaron, my assistant. The man I had trusted to manage everything while I was away. They both scrambled to cover themselves, shock and guilt spreading across their faces. Sarah was the first to speak. "James." "I can explain," she said, clutching the sheets. "Explain." I muttered, the words barely audible over the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. "What is there to explain?" Aaron, who usually carried himself with cocky self-assurance, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. It's not what it looks like," he blurted out, even though it was exactly what it looked like. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The anger inside me was boiling over, but I was too numb to express it. The people I had built my life with had betrayed me in the most intimate and personal way possible. I want both of you out of my house, I said quietly, but with a steel edge that left no room for argument. They gathered their things in a hurry and left without another word, leaving me standing alone in the wreckage of what was supposed to be my happy life. In the days that followed, I had time to think. A lot of time. My house, which had once felt warm and inviting, now felt cold and empty. Everything reminded me of the betrayal, every room, every piece of furniture, every framed photo on the wall. I was angry, heartbroken, and humiliated. But in the midst of it all, Susie was there. Quietly and without fanfare, she continued to do her job. She cleaned, cooked, and kept the house running, just as she always had. But now, her presence brought me more comfort than I ever expected. One evening, after dinner, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, lost in thought. Susie was finishing up the dishes when she turned to me. "Mr. James," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for what happened. If I had known—" I waved her off. "It's not your fault, Susie. You've been nothing but honest and hard-working. They were the ones who lied." She sat down across from me, hesitant but concerned. "I know this might sound strange, but if there's anything you need, anything at all, please let me know. I want to help." Her kindness was unexpected, and for the first time since the incident, I felt a sense of relief. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Susie wasn't just the housekeeper. She was someone who cared. She was someone who had stood by, even when the rest of my life was falling apart. In the weeks that followed, Susie and I spent more time together. It wasn't intentional at first, it just happened. We'd sit together after dinner, talking about life, her studies, my business. She was incredibly smart, driven, and full of dreams. She wanted to become a doctor, to help people in need, and she worked harder than anyone I'd ever met to make that dream a reality. We grew closer. It started with small things, sharing a laugh over a spilled glass of water, discussing a book she was reading for school, or joking about the mess my life had become. But slowly, something deeper began to grow between us. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, our quiet moments together in the house that had once felt so lonely. One evening, as we were sitting in the garden, Susie looked at me, her eyes soft but full of determination. "Mr. James," she began, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. You don't deserve any of this. You deserve someone who appreciates what you've built, what you've done with your life." I chuckled, shaking my head. "That's easier said than done, Susie. I'm not exactly great at picking the right people, apparently." She hesitated for a moment, then said something that took me by surprise. "I think you're stronger than you realize, and I think you need someone who believes in you. Someone who won't take advantage of you." For a moment we sat in silence, but I could feel something shifting between us, something more than just employer and employee. Something real. It wasn't long before Susie and I realized that what we had was more than just a professional relationship. We fell in love, not out of desperation or loneliness, but out of mutual respect and admiration. Susie wasn't like Sarah. She was genuine, kind, and above all, she had a heart full of compassion. We began a new chapter together, and it was nothing like the life I had built with Sarah. This time it was better. We got married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends, and soon after, Susie graduated from medical school. She became a doctor, fulfilling her dream, and together, we built a life full of love, laughter, and hard-earned success. Meanwhile, Sarah and Aaron's lives took a very different turn. Without my financial support, they quickly found themselves in trouble. Sarah, who had always relied on luxury and comfort, couldn't sustain her lavish lifestyle. Aaron's reputation was in ruins after word spread about his betrayal, and no one in the business world wanted to touch him. They tried to live the way they had when they were with me, buying expensive things, going on trips, living the high life. But money runs out quickly when you're not earning it, and soon enough they were drowning in debt. They fought constantly, blaming each other for their downfall, and eventually, they lost everything. Last I heard, they were living in a small apartment, barely scraping by. And me? I was happier than I'd ever been. Susie and I built a life based on trust, love, and hard work, everything I had always wanted but never knew I needed. In the end, success isn't just about wealth or status. It's about finding the right people to share it with, and I had finally found that with Susie. Susie and I didn't just build a life together, we built a partnership. From the day we set our vows, our bond wasn't based on the money I had or the success I'd achieve. It was based on something much deeper, a shared understanding of hard work, resilience, and mutual respect. We were happy, truly happy, and it showed in every corner of our lives. But what made our relationship special was that Susie was never content to just sit back and enjoy the fruits of my labor. Despite my offers to support her fully, she was determined to stand on her own 2 feet. Even after we got married, she still woke up every morning with a drive to pursue her own dreams. It wasn't about pride for Susie. It was about fulfilling a promise she had made to herself long before we met. She had worked so hard to get through medical school, balancing her studies with housekeeping, saving every penny she earned. Now that she had graduated, there was no stopping her. She didn't want to depend on me financially. "I know we're a team," she once told me as we lay in bed late at night. "But I need to know I can take care of myself, too. It's important to me." I loved her for that. Her independence was one of the things that drew me to her in the first place. Even though I could have provided everything, Susie wanted to make her own way in the world. She started small at first, taking up shifts at the local hospital while figuring out what she truly wanted to specialize in. It wasn't long before she discovered her passion, pediatric medicine. She loved working with children, helping families, and making a difference in the lives of the youngest, most vulnerable patients. She spent hours reading medical journals, attending workshops, and honing her skills. As a pediatric doctor, she was brilliant, and she found herself slowly building a reputation for being one of the best. It wasn't long after Susie established herself in her medical career that we started talking about expanding our little family. It felt like the natural next step. We had built a solid foundation for our marriage, and now, we wanted to share that love with children. When Susie told me she was pregnant, it was the happiest moment of my life. I remember the exact day. We were sitting in the kitchen, and she casually placed a tiny baby onesie on the table. I stared at it, confused for a moment, until I saw her smile, a smile so full of joy and excitement that I knew immediately what it meant. "We're having a baby?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes filled with happy tears. We hugged each other so tightly, and for the first time in my life, I felt something even greater than the success of my business or the satisfaction of hard work. I felt pure, unfiltered joy. 9 months later, our son, Lucas, was born. He had Susie's eyes, bright and curious, and my stubborn determination. We were smitten, falling in love with him more and more each day. He was everything we could have hoped for, and he quickly became the center of our world. 2 years later, we were blessed with a daughter, Lily. She was a little firecracker, full of energy, laughter, and a spirit that lit up every room she walked into. Lucas doted on her from the moment he met her, and watching the two of them grow up together was like watching magic unfold. Our family was complete, and every day was filled with the kind of happiness that I never knew existed. We had created something beautiful, something lasting. The 4 of us were a team, and there wasn't anything we couldn't handle together. As the years passed, Susie's career flourished. She became one of the most sought-after pediatricians in the city, her reputation growing with each life she touched. But Susie, being Susie, wasn't satisfied with just being a great doctor. She had bigger dreams, dreams that involved helping more people on a much larger scale. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she sat me down at the kitchen table. She had that look on her face, the one she always got when she was about to embark on something big. "I've been thinking," she began, a small smile playing on her lips. "I want to start my own pediatric clinic. Not just for wealthy families, but for anyone, especially those who can't afford proper healthcare for their kid. I want to make a difference in a way that matters." I was stunned, but not surprised. This was Susie, after all, always thinking of ways to give back, always striving for something greater. "That's an incredible idea," I said, reaching out to take her hand. "I'll support you every step of the way." And I meant it. I had no doubt that she could pull it off. She had already proven herself to be more than capable, both as a doctor and as a person who knew how to run things. But true to her nature, Susie didn't want to rely on my financial backing. She wanted to do it on her own. She poured her heart and soul into planning the clinic. She met with investors, doctors, and community leaders, gathering support and resources. I offered my business expertise whenever she needed it, but she made it clear that this was her project. It took some time, but eventually, Susie's clinic became a reality. She named it the Lighthouse Pediatric Center, a place where every child, regardless of their family's financial situation, could receive the care they deserve. The clinic was a huge success, and I couldn't have been prouder of her. Watching her dream come to life was as satisfying as anything I had ever accomplished in my own career. Years passed, and our life together only grew richer. Lucas and Lily thrived, becoming the smart, compassionate, and curious children we had always dreamed of. Lucas was more like Susie, gentle, kind, and thoughtful, while Lily had inherited my relentless drive and stubborn determination. Together, they were a perfect mix of the best parts of both of us. As for us, our relationship remained as strong as ever. Even as we raised children, managed careers, and faced the everyday ups and downs of life, we always made time for each other. Whether it was a simple date night at home after the kids were asleep, or a weekend getaway to recharge, we never lost sight of the love that had brought us together in the first place. And through it all, Susie never stopped working. Even as her clinic flourished and became a beacon of hope for families in need, she remained humble. She never took money from me, even though I had more than enough to support both of us. She was fiercely independent, determined to succeed on her own terms. I admired that about her. It was one of the many reasons I had fallen in love with her in the first place, and now, years later, I loved her even more. She was my partner, my equal, and the best thing that had ever happened to me. As I looked back on everything we had built, our business successes, our beautiful home, our incredible children, I couldn't help but think about how far we had come. We had weathered storms, overcome betrayal, and found a love that was built on trust, respect, and shared values. I often thought about Sarah and Aaron, the people who had once torn my life apart. I had heard they were still struggling, living in debt and unhappiness, never able to find the success or love they thought they could steal. But that wasn't my concern anymore. They were a part of my past, a lesson I had learned and moved on from. My life with Susie was my future, and I was living it every day with gratitude. Together, we had created something beautiful, something that no betrayal could touch. And in the end, that was the greatest success of all.